Welcome, Mind Spoken Truth family, to Amathongo podcast segment. And this is part two of our topic, toxic masculinity in tradition and religion. I remember Umkulu Maseko had said that this might actually take us a very long time to dissect, and we're willing to do that. So this is part two, and we're hoping that we'll have another guest. And if she doesn't jump on, we'll have her on part 3 or 4. So Mkulu, we left off, we said a mouthful, but not so much, trying to dissect toxic masculinity in religion and tradition. And we left off when you were explaining how religion is tradition.
Yes.
And I wanted us to then, just now we have the skeleton of understanding religion and tradition, what it is, but we're still trying to figure out if toxic masculinity is the right word to use in this context, in religion and in tradition. And also with the few examples I gave you on why I thought or why I think that religion and tradition are toxic. Yes. And I have another analogy that I wanted to pass through to you. And the analogy is I'm just trying to, I'm really like kind of trying to interrogate, let me put it that way, cultures, systems, on why men are placed in specific situations and women are therefore not put in a situation. One thing I noticed in Kulu, right? We spoke about how, customs of doing things because of tradition and culture. And then we spoke about religion of not going into church because you're pregnant out of wedlock. And then there's this other one that also bothers me in Kulu, on the fact that men tend to, abomalume go to lobola negotiations. They do the joyful ceremonies, whereas abo auntie, abo ragadi, bahambisisi, they do the tedious work of those type of roles and duties that we face in tradition or in our cultures. So I wanted us to look at all those dynamics of tradition and culture and religion. And then we just see, is it toxic? Are we using the right word by saying it's toxic? Or should we throw away the word toxic and look into it in a different context? Hello, Jose Khadi. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yes. Welcome back. Yes. No, technology can dribble you sometimes. It happens to everyone. True. I know it. So just to answer your question, there are norms, traditionally, religiously, culturally, in the workplace, in battle, and when I say in battle, in times of war, because the world is a space where there, of course, the ebb and flow times of war and peace. Now, peace attitude, wartime, it's obvious. During an unsettling time of war, there's lots of fleeing, there's lots of fear, there's lots of, subsistent living. We are not living off the fields because the fields are burned, things like that. Long story short, we have to put these things, our masculinities, topics of masculinity and femininity in perspective. We can't just come down with terms and just ride with them just because they come from a particular cultural standpoint, which is why you see in a lot of Pan-African spaces and Black consciousness and Black radical political spaces, there are a whole lot of people who are against feminism, not because they are pro they're anti-women or they are pro-violence against women. But what they are against is a worldview which parachutes ideas from a dominant culture and puts these ideas in our midst, and we are supposed to just live with them, not question them. So a conversation like this is important because we get a space where, as African people, men and women, we can just question these things, questioning ourselves without the white gaze, without the European gaze, without the academic gaze, without amehlo abantu abanye. So what toxic masculinity basically is those norms that are harmful. It's norms that have been passed down that are harmful. They exist in every society. But I mentioned last time, it's important for us to understand that a lot of terms, a lot of labels, they tend to diminish the status and the role of the Black African masculine wholly without interrogating why is the Black man of the 21st century, 20th and 21st century behaving the way he is behaving? What kind of violence has been on him for 500 years? What kind of status has been given for the past? What kind of roles have he been lied to? Has he been lied to actually take up? What kind of religion has he imbibed? What kind of diet is he having, both spiritually, culturally, economically? So his behavior is a result of his environment, just like the white man's behavior. A lot of, not generally, but when you speak about with the white man, we are talking about a particular trope, which is kunabantu who feel superior to others. It's not just the white male, it's the white woman also. When she sees a Black woman, even if they've got the same PhD, she would feel the need to teach her. She would feel the need to civilize you. She would feel the need to correct you. How are you eating? Are you on your P's and Q's? Are you living according to my standards? We went to the same university, same school. We speak same English, probably even better. But lo omunye, because of the society, the dominant culture that she comes from, she feels the need to mother you, or she feels the need to, lead you, Yeah, and there's a dominant culture run by her husband, her white man, who is on the economic level in power. So in that dominant culture, she's underpaid more than him, even if they play the same role. So imagine the other people, because they look at things in a hierarchy. If he's overpaid and he's underpaid, she still does all the work. She works at the boardroom, she works at home. He comes home, kicks off his shoes, hangs up his coat, expects dinner, expects all these things. But now we have to ask ourselves as I close this part, was it always like that in the African society? Where the woman's role, I believe that women in all societies, they work harder than men. I believe, this is my belief, that women are stronger than men, both emotionally, psychologically, and in absorbing the blows of existence generally. I'm not saying that it's that whole thing, woman is about what, but I don't like it. But it's, I don't like the thing. But
it's a very ugly story.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. She may be sensitive, she may, be intuitive, have all these qualities that are sometimes stereotypically put upon her. But that's the role, those are the behaviors in society that have been expected of both a girl and a mother, But the women and the men are raised in a particular way, which means basically you teach the child while they're still young. So what you should be asking is, what is the African child taught that is not taught to other races? Maybe let me just put it there.
The African boy child, African, and I think that's where all the question is. Jose Khadi, what's your thought on this topic?
In my prior recording, I had defined first and foremost what toxicity was, what patriarchy, because I was like, we cannot begin to define toxic masculinity without going into patriarchy, because that was like the basis. But you guys went in went into it quite well in the recording that you sent me. Né? And then when I joined, you had been talking about Burahadi, and for me, what I wanted to talk about was possession. How patriarchy puts possession on the man. A husband has a wife, but their children that they have together, kibandati, they belong to the man. Why I say possession, they belong to the man. It's the surname of the children are always said to be from the side of daddy. Whenever we seek clarity or advice on something, we must ask the rangwane. We must speak to Ndate Moholo. So even if it's on the female side, it will be malume, but we'll always seek and want clarity, want advice on life from the man, when it was never like that. It was really, really never like that, But when are we going back? What I do in my classroom, especially when I'm talking to my children, we were busy with human rights in the workplace. And I was explaining to them, just like Uba Maseko was saying, that I explained to them in the workplace, I need you to understand that it's going to be your reality. It's going to be your reality that you will, as a female, go into a workplace, be hired with a gentleman. You guys will do the same thing, yet your salaries will not be the same. It will even be worse if he's a white person. Right. And I'm not teaching them for them to accept it, because a lot of them are sort of rebellious against that system. Why should I sit in this classroom and you're the only person talking to me? We're not engaging. And it's those small things that when it comes to the education part, it's one person standing in front of you. They have authority over you. They give you permission to go to the toilet. They give you permission to read. It's those systemic little things that are put together so that we're always looking to authority. And should we ever look in front for someone who has to be our authority figure and they're not male, then it'll be the white female and then the black female. So, but I'm teaching it to them to be like, it's not something that should be now taken as this is it. Also, when it comes to Istembu and how we're told Istembu is initiated by the man, but yet he'll occasionally go and seek permission. But in actual fact, when this, especially coming from the modern day Ngunis, the Zulu, Xhosa, those, you go ask for permission, but at the end of the day, if you still want to do it, you're still going to go and do it. So can we sit down with our children and say, this is what has always been happening? This is what has now become a norm. We've got a man in front who must tell us what to do. You made the example of your younger brother when you were in Saudi. He had to come pay. You're already teaching your younger brother that he has authority over his mother.
Superior.
And it's those things that religion just puts in place to make sure that, don't ever be out of line. Don't ever be out of line.
I like how she puts it when she says, positioning, don't be out of line. It's as if we're in combat. It's as if we are soldiers in a system, being ruled and governed in a specific way. And that's where my challenge is. I'm trying to challenge that in the sense that, can we change the roles? Can women have a say now? Can I be the one to go to Lobola negotiation? Because I birthed the child. I gave this child life. I chose for this life to be here. But I have no say as a woman in society, in African tradition, which umtanam uzolobolwa njani. Maruba bakhona, who was going to work Monday to Friday. Amshi umntana no mama ozoncelisa umntana has a say in how my daughter has to be married, has a say in how my son has to go and ayokhipha ilobola and what is expected of him to choose and what he needs. And these are where I'm trying to say, is this toxic? Is this toxic?
Yes.
Can it change?
Yes.
Can we change the system? Because Ukhosekadi touched on a norm. Because once it becomes a norm, it becomes tradition from generation to generation to generation.
It is toxic, my sister. But again, we must not get carried away, because we need to dissect this and break it down to the level whereby we can come up with proper solutions. And the solutions are already here. I'm a great advocate of what is called indigenous knowledge systems. Now, these indigenous knowledge systems are dynamic. They are not, and they are also contextual, right? The indigenous knowledge system of Namibia is not 100% similar to the indigenous knowledge system of Tanzania, or of Abenguni, or Abapedi, or Abakhatla, or according to each village, according to each tribe, according to each nation, according to each people, ethnic group, whatever terms that they put on these differences. That's why I always speak about something called African cultures. I don't believe in one African culture. Personally, as Menzi myself, I believe in African cultures that when you put them together, you can have something what we call Africology, the scientific and logical appreciation and study of Africanity, right? We call it Africology, right? And the reason why I'm raising that up is because we need to learn, if we want to find solutions, we need to learn to separate what is our cultures and what is not, what is foreign to us, and how what is foreign to us influences us, and how we perpetuate it, and how sometimes we take things that are not our own and we make them our own, and we defend them, and we perpetuate them, and we make it worse. I mentioned last time the female genital mutilation, which is a topic that is very hard. It's a very difficult topic to deal with, but there have been women at the forefront of dealing with it since the 1950s. Only in the 1990s did you find women like African American women such as Walker. What's her name? The Walker lady that writes beautiful books. What's her name? Alice Walker, and others. What they do is they have been working. She's been coming in and out of Africa. She's African American, but she's been coming in and out of Africa, working with African women in the villages, writing petitions, empowering them with knowledge of their villages that they may not even visit because they are bound by a particular culture that keeps them in a particular setting, right? They only meet other women in the market, and the information they get in the market or in another place, it's information that is parachuted to them from another culture, in particular Islamic culture. And the Islamic culture, which is a distorted form of even Islamic culture, it's a male-centric, toxic, masculine Islamic culture. Just like African women in the South, we get male, toxic, Christian, Judaic culture, which is not really the essence of what Judaism is. Because I was telling another pastor the other day, I met him at a cafe. Excuse me if I'm making it too long. I'm just making examples. I met a pastor the other day, and I've met him before. But anyway, he asked me some question. And I said, you know what? In order to solve problems that you are finding in the church is losing a lot of members, and there's a whole lot of issues happening in the church, cultism and all kinds of things, sexual assault. There's a lot of things happening in the church. I said, my brother, I'm an African indigenous practitioner, but I can tell you one thing that you can fix in the church. I give him an example of the thing that Moses built, which is the Ark of the Covenant. And it has, if you look at its structure, it has these two angels, these cherubs. These cherubs stand guarding something called the mercy seat. I explained to him, said, go and read your Bible, Pastor, and go and do some research of what is the spirit that resides on the mercy seat. And I explained to him in a nutshell now that mercy seat comes from the Ark of the Covenant, which comes from Egypt, which comes from Sudan, which comes from Uganda, which comes from the Congo. What that mercy seat depicts is something called in Judaic law, it's called Shekinah or Shekinah glory, which is the feminine aspect of your male God. So your male God is the God of thunder and lightning
Yes.
and jealousy and hard laws. But the Shekinah is the mercy part. That's why it's called the mercy seat. In that mercy seat comes forth a spirit called Shekinah. I said, go and study that. Don't take my word for it. Go and do your research. The moment you reconcile the fact that your male God, who stands alone, and he only has a son, doesn't have a daughter, doesn't have a wife, just basically has, it's just males, two males, Jesus and Jehovah. If you interrogate the problems with that, then you will start to unravel the problems in the church. And then if you unravel that, you'll start to get to the tradition, which is Catholic tradition, which is removed even from the church. It is not part, Catholicism is not part of the church's original history. It's only halfway, it's something of 1,000 years ago, or maybe 1,500. So the point I'm making is that there are traditions that come along the way, which put into jeopardy, I don't know what's the right word, ziyahlaza. I'm looking for English. Ukuhlaza is to make something that is pure and make it unpure. When it was actually, as a spiritual discipline, it was good. It accommodated both men and women. But then later, just like African ukuthwala intombi, ukuthatha ithembu noma kanjani, ukushaya umfazi, umfazi uyashaywa. And some men think it's African culture. It is absolutely not African culture. It is something that we learned from dominant cultures that come and impose male-centered ideals on us, and then we perpetuate it. I'm saying we have to look at history. Yeah.
If I can just help you actually on how they were able to. So by taking power away from a woman, for us to not see a woman as anything that can, advise us, is through things such as rape, such as making a woman incapable of giving advice. So those type of putting her in the workplace, but then not giving her full rights, those type of things. Having a woman not sit at a table where her life is being discussed. She's given a bride price. She's given a bride price. We make her a possession. Why, but all those things negate advantage. Umuntu wesifazane angeke ebe anybody would ever look at for anything.
Respect. We don't even give her property in some spaces. I think it's happening in some traditional cultures where women don't have the rights to property. It has to be a little son, whether it's a young or no. Yeah, those things. Yeah, so I think we're about to run out of time for now. We've got I don't know how much minutes, but we're going to start over. But that's all I'm saying, that issue of property, private property is a Eurocentric idea. In Africa, all cultures in Africa, the woman, yomuzi, and indoda, inhloko yekhaya. Now, you can't have inhloko without insika. Insika is like the neck. It's the pillar that makes this house stand up. But the man takes the glory. He's the one sitting there as a inhloko. But the one who actually makes the house the home, there's no debate. It's the woman. But it's a partnership. I want to talk about the partnership. And then we can interrogate toxicity. Toxicity, we can't start it in the middle. We have to actually get it from the root. How do we uproot it? We uproot it by unlearning basically dead religions. We unlearn it by unlearning dead cultures, things that do not longer serve us as 21st century men and women working in the same spot, in the same slave yard, so to speak, and then we can have our own economy back once we know that the foundations of masculine and feminine are on an equal footing.
True. No, I think I like how you all put it. Like especially the last part when you're talking about how a woman is a pillar. I like that. The backbone with the spine. Without the spine, you can't walk. Without the spine, you can't pick up anything. You can't do anything without it. And I think that's one thing that traditional culture has to understand. For a home to operate, there should be a wife. That's why they always say behind a good man, there's a good woman. There's somebody who's leading this ship. there's a captain. There's somebody who knows the direction in which they are steering it at, and that's what I want us to end up at, when after we have dissected everything, the conclusion of how do we, as Ukhosikadi, as Unkulumaseko, as people listen to this, how do we teach people to unlearn? Because it's one thing to talk about it. How do we unlearn? Because one thing I have started doing, which is literally stressing my family out, is that I question. If I am told something, I will question it and I will stand firm at it. Something as simple as, oh, your daughter is going to turn 1, we're cutting her hair. I said, why? Because it's culture. Yeah. Why? Who did it?
Why?
Who said it?
Why?
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, but it's culture. I'm like, but then if you say it's culture, and then they're like, and then those who are religious, I'm like, but then is it Samson who had hair? Did he cut his hair? Apparently there was power in his hair. Why? Like, I have now gotten to a point where I ask why before I do. I do not jump because culture says. I do not jump because tradition says. Until you tell me that somebody died in the family because they didn't do it, then maybe I might consider it, So I want us to get to that point of also having to help people. How do we unlearn it? How do we start? Where do we start as Ubuntu? Because we also, this, like you were saying, that it's 500 years, 1,000 years that it went from one generation to the next. It's hard to undo something that's in your DNA. How do we now change the course of our DNA? Because we standing here today and we're saying we are the generation that is going to stop generational curses. Yeah. We are the ones who are going to heal. So if we are the healers of our forefathers and our kids who are yet to grow, how best are we going to do that? How do we teach people to do that?
I know that for me, I've decided for myself that in my house, right? In my house, my children will not do things like get vaccinated. My children will not go to traditional schools. I want to homeschool my children. When my children are born, I do not want to have the placenta cut available. I wanted to fall off because I wanted to keep feeding my child until it naturally falls off. I want to take that placenta and I want to zokupa and I will have a tree planted there. I want my child to grow up with that, already being connected to the roots. I want to change it. Since I want my child to have certain roots, I will start that way, especially from the placenta, because my child was born from that placenta. Then everything that I have had to unlearn and relearn, I'm only going to be teaching my child that what I had to relearn. And it's something that I have to find someone who thinks the same as me, has the same worldview, and then so that I don't have to be seen challenging, being challenged and having to argue and to say, but this is not why we're doing it. Black clothes when we're mourning. There was a white woman. Yeah, now she wants to mourn and wear black. Then all of a sudden, Nati, there we are. We are now wearing black to mourn. The clothes that you see in these denominations, you can trace it back to European country flags, so you can see who started that denomination. Why must I learn that? And I mean, I'm at a place where I don't do anything unless my ancestors teach me. And they've helped me create that line of communication between us where they tell me, no, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And that is the only thing. And that's me, how I've decided I'm going to change it for myself, my house, and my kid.
I like when you spoke about the black, wearing black to mourn. I remember when the passing of my grandfather, I wore orange. I was 12. And people at the funeral were like, how could you wear it? It's a bright color. She's this, she's that. I wore it confidently. So my grandmother was supporting me. Extended families always have something to say. Then they asked me why I did it. I said, because that was his favorite color for me. At that moment, I was representing the man who raised me. I didn't care at that age that I had to look at 12. What do you know about wearing black at 12? You just love your grandfather. You just love your grandfather, and that's what matters. The rest is, so even if people decide, even you get people say, why would you wear white? White is for a wedding. Who said, how about if I want to wear black at a wedding?
Who said that? Who said that? And the thing is, you can actually trace back to a person. Hence, I understood Uchi. Tradition is subjective.
It is.
The same way, Ubaba, what music can say, you know what? For me and my kids, I feel like we don't want to slaughter anymore. So therefore, this is the last offering I will make. And this is me saying, Ugiapamili will no longer slaughter. And it becomes their tradition. So therefore, I have the right to create a tradition.
Yes, all of us.
Everybody has the right. So let's create new ones then. And then, when challenged, we can say, we trace back wearing black to a queen in England. We trace back church clothes to different countries and their presidents. We trace back this to. So therefore, you shall trace this back to me. You will definitely trace it back to me.
The Unspoken Truth is the catalyst for important and thought-provoking conversations that need to be had. The network tackles social ills, spiritual healing, soul-searching, and mental health awareness. To subscribe, click on the show link to follow our podcast and be part of the Unspoken Truth family. Find us on all social media platforms.